Well, thank you. It's good to see everyone. You should all have gotten the minutes from the last meeting and you should have gotten the list of questions. Because at the last meeting you wanted to reach out to council members. And I do have both the city manager and the mayor lined up for next Tuesday. The city manager will come online at 8:30. I asked the mayor, mayor's chief of staff to encourage him to come at 9:30, just so that you have some time with the city manager before the mayor is appearing. And there's a promise that if something comes up with the mayor that I'll be notified, and then if that's the case, I'll be able to communicate that. But the city manager and I have talked directly and he's very happy to join you then. I did share the questions that were prepared for both of them. Obviously, the city manager's questions are more geared to the elected officials, but I said that you were interested in him weighing in on that as well. And that you'd have other questions for him. And so he's good.
Can I just raise, is it scheduled for a 2-hour meeting then?
It is, I believe. Let's see. It's scheduled for an hour and a half, so I'll talk to our Peg Studio folks and see if we can't make sure that's a 2-hour meeting.
And I get it, like, I really do get it. So if there's any, anybody needs that.
Okay, where do we head from here?
I would suggest that, since you have meeting minutes, that perhaps you see if everybody's in alignment on that and approve the minutes.
I
First,
move
I
to
wanna thank
approve
him
the
for-
minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. First, I just wanted to thank Paul for doing the minutes.
Absolutely.
And we all appreciate that, I'm sure.
No problem. Seriously, that's good.
So I
So-
move to approve the minutes as drafted. Plus, thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to second since they're mine. I like them. Well, I guess all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. What now, Trish?
So I had sent you all, I'm pretty sure I sent you all. I've had a lot of computer issues, so I can't always promise that I've succeeded, but I put the agenda together for today just based on where we had not accomplished things the last time and also accounted for the review of the feedback for elected officials, if in fact you're ready for that. So we didn't really kind of officially call the meeting to order, but that's only because we don't really have a chair chosen yet. We're clearly meeting and in order. I want to note that the only person missing is Brandon Wright, and I will reach out to him and see what the challenges are there, making sure he's getting all the communications. The research materials that I provided, you can decide as a group at what level you want to start that discussion around what I've provided. I know I still owe you information from the consultants. Again, I have some instability with my computer, so I was trying to extract that information from already established documents and send them to you. I might just scan them and send them to you and walk you through them at the next meeting, if that's okay.
That sounds good.
And then the other thing on the agenda was adjournment. So I think that's robust. in terms of the open items to go about doing today. But again, I want to make sure that as staff liaison, I'm responsive in providing you the kinds of information you're after. The email that I sent earlier today was to just go back historically and I can only really go back to 2013 because that's how far back our Granicus system that has our legislative information goes. And so I've got 2013, 2017, and 2021 accounted for with the elected officials' pay rate that was enacted at the time. And then and then for the mayor. So I've got alderpersons, the mayor, and the city manager's information there. If there's something more you'd like me to gather, I would have to ask of the Office of Law, namely the city clerk, to actually go back into prior versions of the code. I don't know that that's something you want me to encourage is done because that's time literally digging through past versions of the code to find that.
Tricia, thank you for the information you did provide. It accomplished what I wanted to know. How long have they been at the salary rate, especially namely the mayor? Because I remember there was a gradual increase during one commission. And but thank you. This accomplishes what I want, but others may want more extensive, but thank you for this.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that we're talking about, 12 years at least that the mayor's salary has been at 98,000. You could see there's little incremental growth to council member salary. I think the biggest impact was with the last salary review commission with adding the $1,000 and then the CPI. You'll also see from the pay data that I gave you from other elected officials that it just varies a lot by jurisdiction. Some of what I think what impacts the mayor's rate of pay is whether our mayor is a working mayor and is full-time committed to that role and what level of authority the mayor has versus what that might be in another jurisdiction. I don't know that time hasn't changed the role for others, but I can say that sometimes that role is more of a ceremonial role and that there's a strong executive leadership that handles the operational parts of that function. Also, in my experience between, because I work for the Anne Arundel County government for a very long time and went through all of their leadership changes over time, but they're set up as a very clear distinction between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And as such, does not have their elected official, namely the county executive sitting on the council, that is an executive leadership role. And so some of that's a function of how the city government is structured. I would suggest that's a really good conversation to have with the city manager. He has a great deal of experience in leadership roles in different municipalities, different county governments, and also has a good background when it comes to discussions around how governments are structured because of his role in working with the International City Management Association. So I offer to you that that's probably better placed in a conversation with him in next Tuesday as you consider the options that you have and your recommendations for the final ordinance that goes into place.
I was wondering, everybody, if, thank you, Trish, if, how everybody did with their outreach. I have sent the questionnaire to and spoke briefly with Ross Arnett in Ward 8 and have not gotten a response back yet. He promised to give me one, but I don't guess, therefore, I'm going to have it until the next meeting. I was just wondering if everybody else has had some luck. How many responses do we have at this point?
I have a response from Alderperson Charles from Ward 3.
I have a response from Rob and Sheila.
I have Harry Huntley in Ward 1 completed.
I have a response from Brooks. I have not had a response from Dewan.
Do you want to go over them? I mean, it seems that makes some sense,
Yes.
Yeah.
or maybe or whoever's
Let
Go
me
ahead.
ask,
Yeah, we can start with Ward 1 and keep it going if we do have that.
Hmm.
If that's a good order to follow, is that okay?
yeah,
Yes.
let me ask that, who's doing Kamala?
No one.
Okay, not Kamala.
Well, I think it's
Karma.
more.
That would be Brandon, right?
Okay,
So again, I will make sure that I reach out to him and call him and have a check-in with him to see how he's doing.
if he's not able to do it, I will volunteer to reach out to her.
Okay,
Let me know.
all right. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
I'll connect you on that.
So I had a nice long chat with Harry. Now, you all realize he's only been a council alder person for 4 months, so he's got a different perspective. He's also got a full-time job himself, which gives him he's got flexibility. It's a nonprofit organization, so he has flexibility in terms of what he does, how he can manage his time between his full-time job and his city job. So on the first question of is the current level adequate? His answer was yes, because he has a full-time job. But you know, he recognizes if you don't have a full-time job, if you don't have flexibility on that full-time job, it would be very difficult. Will it be adequate in the future? Not, he says no. It needs to be indexed to CPI. And, you know, so we talked that one through. He came up with his calculation, and he basically, using CPI, etc., he came up with a figure of 20,250 for the future. What he says is if there were funding, he would rather put funding into additional staff rather than pay for the alderperson. What he would really appreciate would be four full-time legislative aides. And the term legislative aides is sort of a loose term. Basically, one aide for every 2 alderpersons to do a whole lot of the email responses and a lot of the grunt work that he is now doing. For the record, he says he's spending about 30 hours a week with all his constituent and other issues that come up, plus he's on 2 committees and the council. So he would rather, instead of seeing a large increase, see a way to fund legislative aides, but he recognizes that probably isn't going to happen. In terms of his own money, he says he's maybe spent about $100 over the 4 months. It's not a big deal. And the equipment, copying, etc., is perfectly fine. The office needs nothing more. The $2,000, he doesn't have any experience yet. He hasn't tapped into it, so he's not able to really answer it. But in terms of the perks, question G, he mentioned one perk that wasn't included. They get Pip Moyer membership, which she thinks is very important to continue. And being in Ward 1, walking distance to City Hall, he doesn't take much advantage of the parking space, but he knows that that's important for all the other and he says in terms of I forget what is her title, this with the city attorney, the person assigned to the council people. He says he uses her almost daily. She's on all committee meetings.
That's the city council associates too.
Associate,
Yeah.
right. So that's definitely a well-used. Plus, there's also another person who helps them draft legislation.
Yes, that's a legislative and policy analyst.
Right. So they, they definitely need those two positions to continue. And as I said, his view is he'd rather have more time than dollars, and to get more time, he needs the time of an additional part-time aide to. Okay, so moving on to the city manager, he believes. Well, first of all, there's legislation underway that Tricia's talked about to bring the city manager into what is it, an E6 level, and he thinks that's going to be successful. He said, we talked it through, and I sort of made a suggestion which he thought would be a worthwhile suggestion, even though he thinks this legislation is going to be successful. It would not hurt for us to make a recommendation that, we do under the code still have to provide a salary proposal, but we could indicate we believe the city manager is not appropriate for the salary review commission to, first of all, the 8 alderpersons and the mayor, they report to the voters. The city manager reports to the mayor, not really to the voters per se, and that it's an executive function, not a legislative function. So we should give some thought to making that recommendation. In terms of proposed salary, Harry believes probably about 25% increase in the salary would be appropriate. And as to the mayor, I don't know, you all saw my email that we should definitely include asking about the mayor's salary. He believes it's way too low. He believes somewhere in the ballpark of 125 to 150,000 would be appropriate for a mayoral salary at this time. We had a long talk about how these salaries sort of don't allow anyone other than someone on a good retirement income or a good flexible full-time job or with plenty of money of their own to undertake one of these elected positions. But we don't have Harry and I didn't have a particular solution to propose at this time. Any questions?
Yes, Stuart Paul, you had mentioned in the discussion about the city manager that there's a piece of legislation going through, but also that there's some, the proposal is to make him an E6 or something. I've never heard of that. What is?
I'll defer to Tricia, who could give us a full.
Yes, so there's an executive pay schedule that's being proposed. One of the outcomes of the consultant review was that, and it really was suggested further down the organization, but at least have your executive leadership on an open scale. To have a step system with pay steps and, you know, earnings that are delineated to that level, is kind of out of alignment with how most every other jurisdiction is set up. So a recommendation was to have an open range. And that's, has to go before the council in form of an ordinance because it is in the city code. The pay designations. And so they have the scale, they have the executive leadership in there. We went so far as to attach the city manager to that scale. Again, we're kind of overlapping each other here with the salary review commission's work, but to have a placeholder for that recommendation, should that happen. So that information I can share with you. I can send you the ordinance so you can see what it looks like. And know that we also have payrolls that we're developing that give some guidelines around how you advance through that scale, how you advance through an open range.
But thank you. The only one that we would care about, because of our remit is the city manager position.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So when I compile the recommendations and the information from the classification and compensation study with related to market data and then their recommendations, I'll give you the E-scale information at the same time. And then you can see what direction that went in. It sounds like in the conversation that you had with Alderman Huntley, that he's sort of anticipating that as well. And
Definitely.
yeah. But it would require a change to the code in the sense that there's language that says how the city manager's pay is set. And I think what the overriding response or recommendation from the class and comp study from the consultants was that the city manager shouldn't make less than anybody that reports to the city manager. In fact, you want a cushion that provides the opportunity to hire the city manager at a rate of pay that's both competitive, but also in a healthy differential to those that are reporting to the city manager. And the only person that's in the executive leadership group really that does not report, or persons that don't report to the city manager, are those that report to the mayor. And so that's the city attorney and the chief of staff that's in this executive leadership group. Everybody else reports directly or indirectly to the city manager.
Does that legislation also address mayor's salary or not?
It would not, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bottom line is we have to make a recommendation currently on the city manager. What the city council does with any of our recommendations is up to the city council.
Right.
But we're under what the legislation is going to accomplish won't be accomplished before February 4th. So we've got to make our recommendation as to the city manager, and what the city council does thereafter with our recommendation, and with it's sort of like two tracks going with the change to their system is up to the city council.
That would be true, but they would not have the ability to say, okay, we're just taking the city manager's reference out of it. You still have the authority to address that as you know, it's laid out in the code and in the charter for your roles.
Right, the current code, but I assume part of the legislative changes would be removing the city manager from the salary review commission in 4 years.
Correct. And so if your recommendations are such, then it's going to be up to that legislative and policy analyst to create an ordinance that, or a couple of ordinances that accomplish that as part of the recommendations. And I see Faye has her hand up.
Well, thank you for that. How many department head salary or is over the city manager's salary?
So I believe we have two. I believe we have if I'm not mistaken, I know we have the police chief making more than the city manager by right now, probably about 13,000. And I think the fire chief is close, if not over as well. The city
Thank-
manager with all the COLA applications over time is making $200,201 a year. That should be in that report that I sent you earlier.
Right,
Mhm.
but overall, thank you for that, 2 departments, thanks.
So basically, Harry view was, as I said, 25%, so around 250,000 is what he's recommending. Or his thought as to what would be an appropriate salary for the city manager. That it's up to us to pick a figure that we want to. I'm just reporting the information from Ward 1 Alderman.
All right, who had Ward 2?
That's the one we're missing.
Okay, so maybe we'll go to Ward 3.
Okay, so I spoke with Rhonda Charles, and the answer to the first question, do you believe the current level of compensation for your position is adequate? It's no. Do you believe this compensation left unchanged for all the persons during the next 4 years? It's no. If you believe the compensation level should be revised, at what level? She said, yes, it should be revised, but she didn't give a level of compensation. Do you spend any of your own money? Yes. Approximately $150 per month out of pocket. How are the costs for basic office needs covered? She says she pays for them herself. And do you believe the current allocation of funds for education and training of older persons is adequate? She said yes. And for the next 4 years, she also believes that it's adequate. The amount of time that she spends is approximately 12 to 15 hours per day, including weekends and holidays. And she is retired. Question G. She says that there's one small cubicle that each of the 7 older persons share in a very small office, and she doesn't feel as though it's sufficient. She recommends that the staff would be 1 city council associate per older person. And do you believe the compensation package provided to the city manager is sufficient to hire and retain a quality individual? She didn't have a response for that one.
Super, thanks. All right, Ward, what do we got next? Ward 4?
Thank you. What Sheila indicated in A, do you believe this current compensation is adequate? No. It's a part-time job, but it's more than 40 hours is required to be productive in that job. She is also retired to compensate for that. Do you believe the compensation level is adequate? No, but no further input on that. She believed that the compensation should be tied with the cost of living and automatically increase to reflect the caliber of people we want in those positions. C was her cell phone and printer and paper disseminating information to constituents. Not sufficient. Would like somebody to assist with the research, and she thinks she spends about $500 a year. How basic office. How the cost of cover need to be copying. She also she uses her own facility. But she thinks that how are the costs basically need to cover today? And she says no, it doesn't cover the needs. Do you believe the current allocation of funds? She thinks that one municipality that they attend, that's that 2,000. She would like to see it double because it only allows for one event, the Ocean City convention they go to. With that expense, that's kind of tied up with that, with the Welcome More education based on the increase of cost, and that's why she recommend perhaps doubling it because she utilizes that. The space, she agreed it's insufficient for meetings and privacy. The conference room was supposed to be allocated to them, but I assume that must not happen as sufficiently as she would like. For meeting with constituents who want to come confidentially at the city hall, there's no privacy, and it is tiny cubicles as indicated. She feels the percentage she utilizes, let me bring that back, was 20 to 30% of her time. The staff support is not sufficient. She recommended one more individual. And do you believe the council committee, the city manager? She referred to the study that's going on as to her response about the city manager is, and based on the study results, that's what she indicated. Some other notes, the current compensation, she doesn't feel it for all the persons, kind of like less than minimum wage, even with 20 hours. It's inappropriate and doesn't speak again on the value of the position. And that's what she offered. Let me see if I had any other notes on her. That was it. So thank you.
You, all right, Ward.
Can I,
Questions?
I'm sorry, I took off my,
Well, that's fine.
both Sheila and Rhonda would not give a specific figure in terms of what they think it's inadequate, but they wouldn't give a figure as to what an adequate alderperson.
That information wasn't provided.
Is it worth us going back to any alderperson who is not giving a specific number to ask them to really give us a ballpark of what they think would be appropriate?
I can gladly go back to the next one I'll do, provided it, but I can go back to her and ask because I didn't push that. But I can see where that is value added into our project, what they feel. So I will definitely do that. Thank you.
And maybe also, and then also ask them about the mayor's salary.
I can as well.
Yeah.
No, the mayor's salary, I can, let me, if I missed that, no. She was, that was what prompted me to have a conversation with Tricia about where's the mayor's salary and when it last was raised. She reiterated it hadn't been raised in 12 years, she thought. And that was kind of sufficient what Tricia said. So I would say she definitely doesn't think the mayor's salary is adequate, and brought that to my attention from the previous commission that we, a couple of commissions ago, raised it on a steady, because it used to be at 34,000 many years ago, and that is one of those steps and the increase to get it to where it is now, which is long since not been changed since, as I said, 12 years. So I'll go back to her definitely on the recommendation and all the persons salary. Thank you, Stuart.
Well, thank you.
Ward 5?
I talked to Brooks by phone during a break from his work. And we had a nice conversation. He did answer each question. First of all, do you believe that current level compensation for your position is adequate? His answer was no. He said he puts in 30 to 40 hours a week, and the idea that we have part-time is just not realistic. He does say, he did add that he knows that it's not a political fight we can win. B, do you believe compensation level will be adequate if unchanged for alderpersons during the next 4 years? No. In an ideal world, he would recommend paying as if it was a full-time position. But in the current situation, he would recommend an additional $5,000 over the next 4 years. Do you spend any of your own money on items needed for your work as an older person? If so, would you provide an estimate? He said he does not use the stipend anytime. And he thinks that the amount is negligible. And that was his opinion there. He did not make a recommendation for that item. D, how are the costs for basic office needs covered today, copying, etc.? He said the staff handle what he needs. He said he feels that for those who use it, the stipend is sufficient, but the copying, meeting scheduling, etc., is done by staff. E, do you believe the current allocation of funds for education and training is adequate today? He said, yes, it is adequate today. He does recommend that it be altered for inflation over the next 4 years. Estimate the amount of time you spend directly on your work as an older person. He estimates that he spends 30 hours a week. On the other benefits, he also mentioned the gym membership and how that's really appreciated, and he thinks it's great. He also mentioned the access to the pension, the state pension, and it's pretty essential, he feels, to keep the perks such as the parking, that sort of thing. How often do you use the current staff provided by the city? He indicates that he uses the current staff for 2 to 3 days a week for copying, scheduling, and he does feel that that support is sufficient. Do you believe the compensation package provided by the city manager is sufficient to hire and retain a quality individual? His answer to that is yes. And then we spoke about the mayor's salary. He feels that the mayor's salary should be higher, with a pay closer to $120,000. He said it's a very demanding, thankless position. The expense item for the mayor, he feels, is very low. The mayor is required to do a significant amount of travel, etc., and that should be compensated. He said the mayor is doing a lot with a little, and he he also mentioned, quote, "You get what you pay for." Independently wealthy people or retirees are sometimes the only people who can afford to have these positions. And young citizens who have to work full time are not able to look towards one of these positions because it's not feasible to support a family or to live on these amounts. So that was his input.
Question, something new came up in that one, and you had mentioned, and maybe not to be directed to you, but to Trish, and that is this access to city pensions, state pension, county.
So under the Maryland State Retirement System regulations, we are required to offer a pension to them, but they can elect not to join. That's can't remember the exact date that came into being. It wasn't the case 12 years ago. But there's an expectation that we have even our elected officials join the Maryland State Retirement System.
And how does that get funded from the
Just to
individual?
fund it. It's both. It's an employee contribution. The employee contribution is 7% of pay. And the employer contribution is somewhere these days around 24%. It changes. I mean, it's you get your amount from the state based on a funding actuarial determination of funding need. And so the city has to pay a percent as well.
So just to be clear, so has been available for a while, so that's not.
It has been available. It's not a requirement. And there are still vesting requirements by the state. So you could run into a situation where if maybe you already have a pension, maybe you already have a source of income that way, and you would have to be 10 years to be vested in the plan. When you're an elected official, you don't, even with 2 terms, even though there's no term limits here, you still need to make a decision individually as to whether that's a reasonable thing to pursue or not.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing that came up was the reference to the mayor's expenses. Do you have any information on that, Tricia?
So that's
that
kind of
an issue we
interesting.
need
It's
to
not,
worry about?
yeah, that's not, Stuart, that's not really a separate accounted for in your salary review commission work, because the mayor has a budget as well as a department, so the needs of the mayor and staff is something that's submitted through the budget process. That might be more a reference to not having put money or set money aside specifically for the intent of having the mayor out and traveling. As you probably are well aware, in this current fiscal year, there's been some overseas travel. Not all that's been funded by the city, clearly not, but some of that is, for best practices and to get and see firsthand the impact of some of the environmental initiatives for climate change, et cetera, and walkable, policy oriented influences. So I believe that's probably what the reference was about.
That I didn't see. That's not in our remit. We're just talking salary for the mayor.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Ward 6. Who had that? Is that you, Sienna? You're on mute, Sienna.
Sorry. Alderman Gay has not responded. I reached out to him yesterday and I asked Alderman Schneidermeyer also contacted him. And I reached out again this morning, but I have not had a response.
Okay, thank you. I'm in the same boat, so. Ward 7.
That would be Rob, and he said, do you believe the current level it would be helpful if there was an addition? He indicated, so in line with the previous question, Stuart, that we align ourselves with the county because Annapolis is very different and unique, and their city council people make $30,000. So I know it's a bigger territory, I'm thinking myself, but that was some information he offered. We may want to consider that. He said when he took on the role in 2017, he was making $14,000. He definitely has a full-time job. And it's more than a part-time responsibility. To ensure that we attract the diverse and attractive people, you definitely need a compensation of some kind, as mentioned before, retirement or a full-time job to be the older persons in the city of Annapolis. And I'm down to see lunch meetings is what he does. So he thinks he spends about $2,000 a year.
If I,
Of his
is
own
that-
money. I'm
oh,
sorry.
I was just gonna ask that.
Of his own money.
That's it.
Yeah, that's his estimation about at a cost of the basic office needs covered. He says it's definitely 20 to 30 hours. And his day is filled with constituent services, research, and tracking the requests that are made of the older persons. That staff person would help with those duties, he indicated. So he didn't specifically say if it was sufficient. So I'm gonna revisit that with him to confirm that because he offered that he thinks there may need to be an increase in staff. He doesn't believe in. He also believes that he specifically said double the $2,000, but he doesn't because of travel expenses. The city provides the iPad. He mentioned the rec center as well. Do you believe the perks are needed? Additional perks, yes, but didn't indicate what they should be. How do you use the staff? The city. He thinks he uses them daily. And I had mentioned to him we were looking for a job description to see what that person's specific job description is to do, so he could better answer that question. Do you come to the city? The mayor. He says more like a 40-hour job. Let's revisit that as well. I put notes at the bottom because he was back and visiting and things of that nature, and I just wanted for essence of time. He responds to his constituents, legislative staff. Is what he best uses when he uses the city resources. He think it's a heavy 30 to 40-hour week. As far as the mayor, a pay increase, cost of living needed. City manager, he indicated that he felt that there's some department heads that are sufficiently over what the city manager makes. But Trisha, you addressed that earlier. That was under his perception, but he didn't know specifically. He definitely thinks the older person should have an increase, but like I said, no set amount other than he mentioned what the county council makes at 30,000. So let me see if I got any notes on the back. Nope, that's it.
Great. Any questions for that? And then I'm Ward 8 and didn't get it, so we're still waiting on Ross. Well, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Just point out so we're all I hope on the same wavelength. Our job is to recommend salaries. The issue in terms of additional legislative support, aids, whatever, that's a budget item that they would have to authorize, I assume, not something we could, but there's nothing that would stop us from saying, after talking with all the current alder people, that we believe that there is or isn't a need for additional support so that they can adequately do their job. And maybe we recognize that they're all putting in huge amounts of time for very low compensation, and that additional support would ease their burdens or something to that extent.
Mhm.
Just a suggestion I'm throwing out, for us to be thinking about.
Good point. And back to Rob, I want to offer, he indicated he's not currently interested in the mayor's position. So he offered that, and I just wanted that to be noted as well.
That's great. So, how would you like to move forward? I guess one thing, since I'm doing some minutes as we go, I don't see any good reason to try and feed back to you through minutes what was just everything that was just said. That's just crazy. But I think it would be useful if everybody maybe kept their, or maybe well, you tell me at the end, but I'm thinking maybe you do like a little, just a little bullet point summary of the points, and, sort of in order. And then we can have that as a reference guide going forward, because I don't think that would be that difficult, and it would be a lot easier than trying to put them in minutes. Is
Okay,
that
and
reasonable?
that sounds reasonable. But also, legally, I don't think our minutes need to reflect everything what these alderpersons said. They're helping to guide us in our commission duties. So I don't want to be concerned with misquoting something or misinterpreting, but I thought I heard da-da-da. So I really don't think we need to do that, but use it as a guide and a tool as this group overall. We're hearing the same flavor, 30 to 20 to 30 to 40s, some that way, some this way with the newbie. So we just use it as a guide as far as working with this. And I'm very appreciative of them offering. I think that because of our relationships with some of them, they were very trusting and matter of fact. And it was nothing was a harsh conversation for me. I think they're all just trying to be useful tools so we can do something successful, recognizing where there might be changes needed. I just want to offer that as well. But
I really like your idea, Trish, of wiping off the referent, whoever said it. In other words, you're just I don't know how we'll do it in the end, but we don't have to append these anything for them.
No.
But we should be able to reference it ourselves while we're chatting.
Well,
the
the
city
minutes
wrote-
could reflect that we have already had conversations with X, Y, and Z, and leave it at that.
Because it is a campaign year, and I have been on commissions where what we said was quoted, as I've said previously, in the paper. So because it's public record. So
I mean,
you got a look on your face. What is that for?
Me?
I just want to say, I mean, what we just did was public record, so it's not like somebody couldn't find it, but there's no
Very much so.
we don't need to do that. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the
It
day,
is
we just want
recorded.
to, we just want to say, the sentiment was this or that, or
Yeah,
whatever.
great idea.
Yeah, I mean, the authority is yours. I mean, the code and the charter provisions are laying out your role and your responsibility. And to the extent that you take in research information from various sources, that's how you've decided as a group to conduct your business.
Thank you.
And that ultimately it's your collective decision making, and having a representative who reports to the council, and then there'll be an ordinance that's formed accordingly.
So I'd like to just throw out, just a preliminary sense of the body. Do we think that the salary, just on the alderpersons, are adequate going forward?
Based on the feedback. I'm
Just
sorry.
curious, is your dog in favor or not in favor?
All right, so I'll be more clear. I believe it's totally inadequate. So I'm just trying to see where we stand as a commission at this point.
Based on the feedback that we've received, it's along the same lines that it is not adequate.
I actually, I find, I find looking at these salaries from, my prior career, this compensation is, in my opinion, it's embarrassing that it has not changed in all of these years. For a city such as Annapolis. I'm shocked at the compensation and how low it is for those of us who know the amount of time these individuals are putting into this job. All of them have told us they're spending, 30 to 40 hours a week, and with very little support staff, that I think, I would like to see. I know the financial constraints that the city is under, that the state is under, but I would like to see us give consideration to, some of the requests from some of the alderpersons.
Paul?
Faye had her hand up. Why don't you go ahead, Faye?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. I want to give you some insight. In the previous commission was right after COVID. The city had lost significant entertainment, tax revenues, things of that nature. I think the feeling of that commission that it was insufficient. I can only not speak for all, I can speak for me on that previous commission, but there was a significant loss of Naval Academy income from the stadium and the overtime the police officers and fire departments would provide to various events that just didn't occur. So that being said, think we should consider additional compensation. So I just wanted to offer that to the group.
And I'm along those lines too. I mean, just sort of, I've worked a fair bit with Ross, and I know I can't speak for him, but I can almost guarantee you he puts in more than 40 hours a week. I mean, that's for sure. And apparently so does everybody else, or pretty darn close to it. And Ross is retired, for example. So, and what is this? What's the number is? We're talking basically $18,500 a year plus a 2.5% CPI or something like that. I mean, I don't know that we can get where, was it Mr. Schandelmeyer or somebody was talking about, which is 30, but I certainly do think that some increase is reasonable, and we ought to talk also about the staff issue as well. That's a harder hurdle, and it's not in our remit per se, but like Stuart said, we can make recommendations that they can consider or not consider. But I'm with you all, and certainly the mayor, who we know works all the time, is really not making very much money in this day and age.
Yeah, it was Rob who offered that 30,000. I just wanted to share that, and definitely the resounding message we're getting that it's just not adequate, and we want to attract younger people and that don't have a pension or a full-time job that permits that, so we can engage and drive us into the next phase of Annapolis. So we want to attract that quality candidate. That's what I heard a lot with Rob. So I think the city budget was a challenge then. I can't speak on the city budget now. I used to be on the Finance Advisory Commission for many years, so I probably would have insight, but I've been off that commission now a couple of years, so I don't know. We're only doing a recommendation, and as you said, they are to decide what the next steps will be.
Uh,
Thank you.
I want to throw in a couple things. One, Sienna's embarrassing statement, I think, should be part of our report. It is embarrassing. Two, I see, and you may all not agree with me. I appreciate what Faye was saying about the budget situation, but I see our job as what is an appropriate compensation for the alderperson and the mayor and the city manager. It's their responsibility to figure out how to budget for it. And so I'm not embarrassed to say that the 30,000 figure for the county council seems appropriate to me at this juncture for the city council people, considering the fact that they're putting in all those hours and they have limited resources at their disposal to do the jobs that they're elected to do, and that the city has a responsibility to adequately compensate. And as Faye was saying, or Rob said, and that was also part of my conversation with Harry, is that this sort of discriminates against people who can't afford to might have the civic urge to participate, but they just can't possibly do it with that level of compensation. $30,000, if they're working 30, 40 hours a week, is still peanuts.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that for what it's worth. And it's still early stages. So, I mean, this is conversation at this point, just as
exactly. Yeah.
I'd have to think twice about the idea of 30, but I certainly wouldn't have to think twice about a pretty nice increase. So just as a point, because I also want to make sure that we think about overall what kind of number we're talking about when we're done with all of these conversations, because we still need to talk about the mayor and talk about the city manager. And it would be lovely to have a sense of what are, if there's any room in the budget. But I also take your point, really take your point, Stuart, which is, our job is not to worry about the budget. Our job is to make reasonable recommendations on salary. So I appreciate that.
Definitely a value added point, Stuart and Paul. I don't know how many constituents they have in the county compared to how many they have in the city. I would love to gauge that, but definitely the other thing that just came to mind, that climate back then, they were trying not to lay off any city employees. So we were mindful of that with COVID. So it definitely made 4 years back, 8 years back, a compensation look at, So you're right. We don't need to think about how they're going to make it happen or if they'll make it happen, but it's just what we think. So that's a good point.
How they're going to do it and if they're going to do it is a political decision for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's not our job.
Not our wheelhouse.
And in terms of your, how many constituents, ballpark, I think the city's about 40,000. There's 8
Yeah.
council people, so that's about 5,000 constituents per alder person and obviously the county council there's 7 council people, I believe. So I'm sure they must have 50,000
Okay.
constituents, but it still requires about the same
Same
amount of
hour.
time, I would guess.
Yeah, I know I know how many people in the city. But I was curious about the county. But you're right. If it's only that $10,000 people, perhaps I can see that. I was just trying to get it
Yeah, I
in my
know.
head in proportion. But thank you for that.
That's just top of my head, ballparks.
Mhm. I do think though the county council has a significant number of staff people who can constituent issues, for example. There's an entire department who handles constituent issues.
Yeah.
I think in the alderman's case, the alderperson is handling those constituent issues themselves, making contact with the department, that sort of thing. So, I think sometimes we're, we're comparing two things that aren't anywhere equal. So that's a big difference with the county staff, the county council, and also the county executive's office, because it is separate from the council. There's another level to handle many of the day-to-day constituent issues that our aldermen do not have the ability to handle.
So may I offer a couple of pieces of information? First of all, Anne Arundel County's population as of 2023 was 595,000.
Mhm.
So there's a population piece for you. In my experience, having worked for Anne Arundel County for a very long time, that is, while that is true, that there is the county executive's offices and there were and probably still are a whole constituent services group that does address that. We do have in the city as well people that serve the role of ombudsman and constituent services and at the department level. So what you have is the role of the council might be to connect them to the right people to get some of their needs met. But it is them that's doing that, as opposed to Anne Arundel County having each of their council members have an aide, a legislative aide, and they are called legislative aide. And those individuals are full-time, and those individuals would probably be the first point of contact and screen some of that that happens. There have been prior years' efforts to add staff. The challenge is if you add just, how many do you add? Do you have one per? Do you have just one extra? And then how do you divide the responsibilities among 8 different wards, How do you make sure that person is responsive to and able to meet the needs of 8 different individuals, or any combination thereof? Adding 8 staff persons to have a full-time individual to then serve the council would be a considerable difference in terms of financial support. But it's just trying to think through that as well. How would you meet those needs?
Thanks. Just out of curiosity, so right now there is one. It's not even a truly dedicated staff person. or is it a truly dedicated staff person?
It is a dedicated staff person in the sense that that individual is serving as support to help arrange for and set up all of the committee meetings, council committee meetings. And is there for minutes, is there for technical support and guidance during that. That person is also reached out to for dissemination of information. But again, not really serving exactly the same role as you have in the county, because that's our point of comparison here in terms of that dedicated legislative aid.
And how much is this individual paid? Are we,
I don't.
that'll give us
know
a
if
sense
it's-
of what these numbers.
I
could be.
I can get that information for you and let you know.
Yeah, I just think that'd be useful because
Yeah.
like you, I mean, the idea of adding one per, it could be massive.
Well, and it's not just their annual pay, right? You
Yeah,
have
it's all the
FICA,
benefits.
Medicare, plus all the benefit costs, so.
Yeah, and which we should have to take into account because that's all
Yeah.
out of the budget.
So let me see if I can get, it's less about what the individual's making, but give you kind of an idea of what that range might be.
Okay. Based on this discussion, let me throw out, would it be helpful for us to see if we could interview Lisa Robbian, our county council member from this district?
Never hurts to get
Either-
information.
Either an individual interview with her or have her join one of our meetings.
It sounds like you have a rapport with her. Is that true, Stuart?
Well, I've campaigned for her in the past.
I mean, I'm fine with that, and whether she appears live or if you just interview her, Stuart, and come back with information, either way works for me. Not opposed to either approach.
Do people have a preference? Would you all like to have her be interviewed jointly, like the mayor and the city manager? Or I'm happy to just one-on-one with her if that's your preference.
Maybe the one-on-one might not be overwhelming, and she can offer some insight. But if anybody else wants to meet with her, she would have to be obviously on record with this format. I don't know if she's receptive to that, but whatever you think is best, Stuart, I defer to your opinion.
Well, let me just add, the main topic is basically, as far as I'm concerned, how much time does a county council person spend doing council business, their business as a council member, not the compensation issue, but just for comparison purposes, what time they're spending doing their job as elected council person.
And what is the county getting out of that $30,000 salary with her job description? What does it entail with her, correct?
I don't know
Get
that it's
guidance
apples.
on that.
Is it really apples to apples anyway?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
it's interesting, but it's not really relevant.
It would be gauging the gap from where our older persons are to where, which I think is not anywhere where we would be anytime soon at that salary range. But it would tell us what it entails in between. So maybe we could land somewhere. I don't know if that's useful or not, but I'd welcome her opinion, but I don't know if time needs to be taken up with our limited time to do that. I don't know. But I defer to the group.
I agree with you, Faye. I think because we're under time constraints, Stu, if you could meet with her one-on-one and then report back to us, that would be great. And you probably get some honest feedback where she may not want to give it in this forum.
And I think the experience of the county council is different, as we have said, different in many, many ways than the alder persons. But knowing the amount of extra time that they put in, which I think is probably about equal from my experience with them. And it's not equal among among the persons on either the county council or on our city council. You know, different older persons put different amounts of time in on older persons' work. And some because they have the ability to do this job full time, versus those who have full time jobs and have to do this additional work, you know, evenings and weekends, that sort of thing. So, you know, but I think it's good to get the input, you know, for various reasons.
So Stuart, will you reach out then? Great. So where do you guys want to go from here? Would you have something else that we should be talking about today?
I have a question, and that is, how much do you want us to pursue people who have not given us input? The reason I'm asking this is and this may be an assumption on my part, is that some people may not want to give us input because it is public record. What we say here is public record, and it is an election year. And so how much do you think we should pursue those people who have not given input yet?
I know from my end, I heard from Ross, he just didn't have time to get back because he was traveling or doing some darn thing. So he'll respond. So I'm happy to do that. But, you know, I think that means we're only missing one other, assuming Ross comes in.
And Sienna, you've given a lot of effort in trying to make that happen with a response. So I think three times that you've indicated you tried, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If he reaches out before our commission's over, maybe we'll add it in, but I don't know how many more times you would have to. Oh, have you emailed his older persons?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So I think that's a valiant effort. I honestly want to say so. I don't think there's anything more you can do than what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And with Ross sounds like he's coming, and we'll add it in when we.
Yeah.
And Ross's opinion would be good, especially since he's indicated he's not going to pursue it further. It might be unfiltered.
Somehow I think it's always unfiltered.
I grew up in Eastport, so that's why I say I'm on the other side of Eastport now. But so.
No, that sounds great. And I'm sure he'll be back soon. So, and I concur, Sienna, you've done your best. It is what it is.
So for the next meeting with the mayor and the city manager, we're using these questions formats. Are we adding any other questions to that? And with that being said as well, I think we probably need to land at this point with leadership as to who will chair this commission. I think Trisha would be happy. So
I nominate Paul.
I
be-
second.
I third.
to chair.
Oh no, he's pausing. Okay.
Well, I have a speech prepared. No, that's very, very kind of you. And if that's the will of the group, I'm more than happy to do that.
There will be no inaugural parade for you. So
Thank you.
But thank you so very much.
Can I issue executive orders or anything
No.
like that?
No.
Okay.
Next subject.
I'm sorry, all. My furnace guy and I are having conversations. So are you adjourning? Is that?
We voted Paul as the chair. That's the only thing
Excellent.
you've missed so far. If you're
He
in,
got my vote too.
okay. So it's a great productive meeting. So, and my original question, do we have anything else to prepare for the upcoming crucial meetings with the city manager or the mayor that we need to prepare question wise,
Trish, you
other
said,
than the guidelines?
Trish, that you were, you had already or were going to send them a copy of that.
I did.
the
I already
questionnaire.
shared the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody we're all
ready.
separate and ready to go. So if you have questions, you have questions. Because hopefully they'll do, maybe Trish just told them they should do a little sort of intro, based
Yeah.
on that, and then we'll get to it's not like we have
I
to
can lead
read
them
the
into that.
question. Yeah,
I can lead them into that. No problem.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Is there anything else that anybody wishes to bring up today then?
No,
Okay.
great productive meeting.
Really productive, and Trish, thanks for all your assistance. I'll run down Ross. We have our next meeting set for 8:30 on the 28th, right? At which we'll have the mayor and Mr. Mallison, the city manager. And what time did you say, Trish, again, they were coming on?
So city manager Malinoff will be at 8:30 and the mayor's been asked to arrive at 9:30.
So
And I will prepare the minutes, or not the minutes, but the agenda and get that published.
Okay, and I'll do a quick minutes. These actually won't be so long as the last ones because of I'm not going to go through all the discussion about each of the reports. But save those so that we have them, so that we can refer to them. Okay, then again, thank you all for your vote of confidence. I look forward to doing whatever I can to make this very successful and entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, have a great weekend, everybody. All in favor? Forgot that. Aye.
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 Have a great weekend.
Good luck, Stuart.